Hi there, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to yet another cracking installment of the Matt Brown Show. Today, we are joined by an incredible founder. His name is Sachin Garg. This is the Built in California series. Sachin, welcome to the show.
Thank you, man. Thank you.
Sachin, apart from being a globetrotter, you're currently in Bangalore, but usually based down in Cali. So, you are the founder and CEO of Saren.io, doing some awesome stuff. So we're going to get into the meat and the potatoes around that. But for our viewers and audience around the world who potentially haven't heard of Sara and yourself, why don't you give us the elevator pitch about you and the origins to Sara?
Sure. So by education, I'm an engineer, right? So very technical. And I studied in India from one of the IITs. Right after that, I landed in New York and joined a company called Symbol. And I was part of a team which was building what was RFID system. So done some really cool stuff, technically good, filed a few patents. And a few years back, I was bitten by entrepreneurship bug. And I built my first company that was into mobility solutions, which were acquired later by another company. Then I built my next company, which was about retail analytics using AI and computer vision. Unfortunately, because of COVID, that did not go as we planned. With COVID, all the brick and mortar kind of went down, and with that, unfortunately, we also went down. But that got us a lot of interesting learning. And while working on that, we were looking at COVID happening and then e-commerce taking off. And while, as a shopper, I was trying to return a product, bought online. I went through some very interesting experiences that led to this, problem of returns as for businesses. And that's when we really started to work on it, that can we really solve this problem? Because this is really a bad problem for businesses, for environment, and even for the consumer, right? Nobody likes returns. And that's how basically Sara got originated in the current form. And we have a product called Eco Returns, which is used by hundreds of merchants around the world now.
Fantastic. So you're in the reducing of returns business or space currently, right? So let's talk about like how big is this problem? So obviously we all know like Amazon's like $1 trillion market cap company. We everybody seems to buy in the US everything from Amazon most of the time. I've got packages arriving here like every single day, toys for my kids, like various
Yeah.
bits and bobs. But I'd love for you to paint a picture for us, Sachin, around like how big is this actual problem in dollars? Like how big is this return space actually?
Right. That's a great question. So, one of the things which I learned from my previous ventures was to not to jump onto an idea just by looking at it, right? Do some research. And one of the important point is how big is the problem? Because if it is not big enough, you'd rather not do it, right? Because somebody else will take care of it. So when we digged into this deeper, we figured out last year, for example, if you look at it, almost $500 billion worth of goods were returned. That's the number we're talking about. And this number is expected to become about 750 billion in next couple of years. So that e-commerce is growing and this number is going to grow and grow. Now, this market is pretty big, but there is a fundamental, shift and differentiation in certain ways, right? We talk about Amazons, Walmarts of the world. Yes, they are there, but there are a lot of other, brands, D2C players, drop shippers who are also, doing a very good amount of business. For example, if you look at Shopify net GMV is not as big as Amazon, but last year it was about $150 billion roughly. So those kind of amounts of goods are being sold or directly by the merchants to the customers, and that's where I think we operate on that specific part of the problem where direct to consumer brands or retailers are struggling with returns, and that's where we come in.
So, Sachin, what is the impact of this return space on things like landfills or the environment or the economic impact even of on retailers or e-commerce retailers specifically? What does that look like?
Right. So one of the single largest reason why e-commerce retailers are not becoming profitable, many of them, is because of returns. That's the biggest reason why they do not get profitable easily, right? So problem is really, the impact is massive. And if you look at from an environmental perspective, almost one third of every good which is returned actually ends up in landfills, right? So we are talking about over $100 billion worth of goods are actually landing up in landfills, on an annual basis. That's a massive number, and I'm not even counting the reverse logistics, CO2 emission because of that. I'm not even counting, that's a very different domain altogether. Just the landfill part itself is over $100 billion worth of goods. So it's pretty bad, from business perspective as well as from an environmental perspective.
Mhm. So what are e-commerce companies then focusing on instead of focusing on things like returns management or reducing the returns? I know like there's returns management like as part of a process. Like if you're like you have to have that, but what it seems to me like they're not actually focusing on the reduction of returns. Do you know what I'm saying? Like it's the thing. It's almost like the
Yeah,
optimization play that goes along with oh damn, someone's returned a product to me.
right. Yeah. So if you look at, so one of the things which Amazon has done very well is that they have created such great customer expectations, experience expectations, that every brand is now forced to really provide similar kind of experience to their customers. And I think that's where the returns, and when you talk experience, the returns naturally become a part of that. So there are a few companies already, quite a few companies actually, who offer returns management. They're pretty good at it. But their primary objective is to really be able to have great customer experience when they are placing a return request. Some of them go one step ahead and try to convert those returns into exchanges, which basically protects, the merchant from a revenue standpoint, because you're not losing money, you are shipping something else instead of what was shipped originally, which is fair. But there is a lot more things which can be done essentially to really solve this, the amount of return, right? We have seen in some cases, certain categories, certain territories, we have seen 55% return rate. So out of every two goods sold, one actually comes back, in many, many cases, right? Some people operate at 30%, 20%. There are different variations, but the number can be very high and can be moderate. And regardless of that, it's a huge impact. So in the market, most of the people are focusing on experience, which is required, on managing returns, and trying to convert some of them to exchanges. But fundamentally, why do returns happen? Can I do something to protect the environment and the merchant and the consumer, all of them, from returns? That is something. It's the bigger problem that needs to be solved, and that's exactly where we come in.
Mm-hmm. So, Sachin, talk to us about your product. So, how do you guys actually go about reducing returns? So, let's just say I'm doing 1,000 transactions a month as an example. Let's just say 10% or 20% of that is being returned every month. Maybe that's a high number, but why don't you explain to our viewers and listeners around the world, like how does your product actually now solve this problem of reducing returns?
That's a great question and a difficult one as well, right? So, to solve this problem of returns, let's first try to understand why returns happen at all, right? And there are many, many reasons, right? If you look at different kind of industry segment, for example, apparel, footwear, accessories, these are the places where the returns are much higher as compared to, let's say, grocery, for example. And the returns happen, for various reasons. One is that many times when customer is buying something online, they are not able to, of course, get a full complete feel of the product altogether, right? So you don't really know, you end up buying it. And what you can see a product in real life versus when you see it on a website, that could be a little more artistic with some photo effect, which can also kill means enhance the look of the product many a times, but that might be a little away from the reality, right? Then many a times the customers are little too sensitive. Some customers are very sensitive. Even if it is a minor little issue on the product they have received, they want to return it, right? I mean, instead of trying to see, returning will not lead to any benefit to anyone, they simply try to return it. Then there are many other reasons, such as the fitting issues, for example, lack of awareness. Most of the people are not aware when they're returning actually what is the impact on the environment or the merchant, right? They don't know. I was not aware of it. So my personal return rate, what I return has gone down by at least 60-70% since the time I have dug deeper into this problem. So to solve these problems, I think we have taken a holistic view. What we have done is that in our solution, we have built small micro tools. Those tools include things like incentivization, for example. Sometimes when a customer is trying to return, our AI kicks in and understands that whether customer really wants to return or he's kind of on a borderline case, right? If it is a borderline case, they try to offer some kind of an incentive so that they don't return the product and keep it, right? And in that case, everybody is happy. Merchant is happy because the customer has got an incentive, which he can use to buy something again. Customer is happy because he got an incentive. And environment is happy because the return did not happen. The customer will be able to use the product, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then we have additional tools such as the advisory tools. When customer is really trying to make a buying decision, can we give them advice about right size, right fitment, how people of their category, what kind of size they typically buy, right? To help really people buy the right thing so that they don't have to return it later.
Mm-hmm.
And then we also have some additional very interesting tools where we kind of financially protect the merchant as well as the consumer from returns if it happens at all. And that also helps reduce, right? So at this moment, using some of the tools which we are typically able to reduce returns by 30-35%. I'm not even counting exchanges. Exchanges are exchanges, that's separate. And our objective is to really be able to get to a number like 70% over the next few months. They will get to a place where we'll be able to reduce returns by up to 70% in most cases.
So, Sachin, could we please paint a real world example here? So, let's just say I'm an e commerce retailer, but I'm on the Shopify platform. I know I brought your website up for everybody, and I'll do it again here. You've got this thing here called Eco Returns, and this is one of the tools that you guys obviously, offer to your customers. So, what I'm curious to understand is, how do I actually work with these tools? Do you know what I'm trying to say? So, like, do I integrate with my Shopify platform, or my Amazon, e-commerce store? Like, how does the integration and the actual engagement work with between you and your team and then e-commerce retailers?
Right. So Eco Returns is more like a plugin. If you have a Shopify store or let's say Magento store, right, you can, by clicking a few buttons here and there, you can actually connect Eco Returns to your store, right? So it is very simple. Nobody has to be technical to really be able to set up Eco Returns onto their website, the e-commerce portal. And we don't really support Amazon's like platform at this moment. And the primary reason being that um, we cannot control the consumer side experience onto Amazon because that is owned by Amazon. In fact, even the brands don't own their customers because they are all owned by Amazon finally. Right? That's one of the reasons why people are moving to their direct selling onto their own websites using Shopify, Magento kind of platforms. So it's pretty simple, and then we as a company also offer free assisted onboarding. If somebody has a difficulty, we can get on a call with them. In some cases, we have seen our customers going live with us in less than 6 minutes, that quick. But in some cases, it takes a little bit longer, depending on the complexity of the store and the kind of integration needs. Uh, but typically speaking, most of our customers are able to go up and running in less than 30 minutes. Only in the cases where somebody needs very specific integration, let's say somebody is using a CRM system, which we are not by default integrated. In that case, we have to work with the customer and provide that integration. That may take up to a couple of weeks for them to get live, but that's about it. So it's
Uh,
pretty simple, I would say.
Well, that's good. Good news. So it's a short time to value. So that's really good news. One of the things you mentioned, COVID upfront, and its impact on one of your previous companies. One of the things that COVID did do was drive adoption of e-commerce. As a thing that you do as a consumer. And so, prior to COVID, it was kind of like, I mean, there was a UK stat that I came across where like there was this massive hockey curve. It was just like massive adoption. If you were in e-commerce during COVID, like you won, you absolutely won. You totally, it was just like people had to shop online. You couldn't go to store. What are some of the current trends that you see engaging with e-commerce retailers in the US and obviously in Europe? in the context of reducing returns and so forth. But what are the kind of other trends from a category perspective? What do you see playing out over the next 6 to 12 months in the space?
Yeah, 6 to 12 months are very interesting question actually, right? It is not just because of e-commerce, but overall because of the global economical conditions, right? Right now, because of Ukraine war is going on, inflation is very high. So I think we have to still understand a little bit more about the impact on the overall consumer behavior. However, one thing which I can be, very sure about is that a lot of these brands during COVID times were focused on their top line, trying to increase more and more revenue because the time was right, market was right. But now I think a lot of these will start thinking of profitability as well, right? Because you cannot keep growing the same way you were growing earlier during the COVID times. And and because of inflation, the cost of the goods are going high, and a lot of people would be cautious with spending their money, right? So and even the money flow to these merchants will be slightly reduced, I would say. Keeping all of these in mind, I think it's very important for most of the online sellers to really start focusing on profitability if they are already not doing it, rather than trying to chase, very rapid growth. Rapid growth is always good, but sometimes you have to become more sustainable as well. And I think next 6 to 12 months are more about being more sustainable financially, of course, environmentally, but financially as well, right? And and the short way of really becoming financially sustainable is to be able to control your returns. If you can control that, I can say that most of the businesses can become profitable very quickly. And that's where we can possibly help as well.
So, Sachin, when you say quickly, like how quick is quick? I mean, if you and I work together, let's just say I want to launch a store selling. Maybe it's a bad example. I wanted to say NFTs, but let's just say shoes or retail clothing, fashion apparel, stuff like that. It's kind of like your shirt. You got a great shirt on. But how quick do you feel like how quick is it really feasibly to become profitable? Is it like a month one? 6 months? When is that profitability window realistically realized?
I think it depends a lot on that specific store and what kind of gross margin they are operating at. It depends on a lot of those parameters, right? But if you're deep in red, if you're not deep in red, and it's primarily because of the returns, right? You can actually become profitable as early as 30 to 45 days of starting. So it's that kind of quick impact. But most of the business, when I look at the data, when I see our customers, most of the customers have be able to turn around things in within 90 days and become profitable. You know, provided your focus is on profitability, right? If your focus is on profitability, you can get profitable. But if your focus is only growth, then of course your money will go into marketing, customer acquisition, and that will continue to drive your cost, which can be high.
So here's the thing. So I know for a fact that advertising costs are skyrocketing across platforms. So if you're trying to advertise on like Google, Facebook, LinkedIn, etc., even on Google, the average small business, this is a real stat, current one, spends $9,500 a month on advertising. The average small business. That's a frightening amount of money for a guy who's launching an e-commerce store. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And even then, when you have customers and you're starting to scale, your cost of acquisition is getting more expensive. So that eats into your margins. And we all know that in retail, e-commerce, or in store, margins aren't exactly sitting at 45%, where you have a bit of
Yeah.
headroom to kind of get squeezed through your customer acquisition channels and strategy. So if these costs are going up, Sachin, what is your advice to entrepreneurs, founders who have an e-commerce interest and maybe are selling other things, and they're going, hey, like my cost of acquisition is going up for my SaaS company, for instance? What's your advice in terms of either reducing that cost of acquisition or maybe a tactic that can help their e-commerce store grow?
That's a great question, right? Um, though I do believe I'll mix a couple of things here, right? So next 6 to 12 months, I do expect the Google ads and Facebook ad price to be going slightly down because of the impending recession and this, but still the cost will continue to be very high. It'll still be very high. So the only advice I can give is that, and we follow the same, is to really acquire repeat customers, right? Make your customers happy so that they buy again and again from you rather than keep chasing new customers all the time. That's very, very difficult. Um, and that is possible when you give them right value, right? Great experience, great customer support, right? And I think that's something which can really, really help a lot, most of these businesses. Also, I think the rule of 80/20 applies here, as most of the places. You got to know which 80% or which 20% of the customers are important for you. They give you most of the revenue, 20% will give you most of the revenue. So you might want to go out of your way to make sure that those guys are happy. They keep coming back to you again and again, rather than trying to spend a lot of energy on the people who are probably 80% and giving you only 20% of the revenue, right? So for example, in our system also, we we look at behavioral data of the store, consumer, product, all of that combined together, and we get to see that some people are serial returners, for example. Some people are not. They are very, very cautious when they buy things. They don't return it, right? So as a business, whom would you want to go after? You would want to go after the products which are not returned easily, the customers who do not return just like that, right? And that can definitely increase your profitability and reduce your focus on keep acquiring new customers, because you need new customers all the time when you have a lot of churn happening. If your churn is low or not low, then you don't have to spend that kind of money on acquiring new customers all the time.
Hmm. Yeah, it's interesting where you sit because you're kind of sitting in this interesting, almost like operations space. You know what I mean? Like it's so you're looking holistically at like the whole business, but and then obviously creating value on the reduction of returns. But actually, you're kind of more of a solutions or strategic partner also to e-commerce companies. For instance, like what listen, if you want to reduce returns, here's how you do that. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
looking at other and like a number of data points that actually would help not only reduce the returns, but there may be other kind of non-obvious things that may play a role here. So, for instance, maybe the question to maybe articulate kind of like what I'm trying to get across is, what is the role of brand in reducing returns? Because if you know what I mean, like if you buy something super cheap and nasty, you're more likely to return that thing than if it was a more premium brand that you were like, well, it's the brand I'm sticking to, even though the product, may not be exactly what I want or may not exactly meet my specifications or expectations. So, what is the role of a brand in reducing returns, for instance?
That's a very interesting question, Matt. So I think the brand has a huge impact, right? The brand is actually in customers' mind finally, right? So if a brand is good, a customer would usually not return a product saying it is not good or I don't like it, because in their mind, it's a great brand, great product. They might still return because of the size and fitment and those kind of issues, or by any chance if a product is defective, which is unlikely for a good brand, those cases that can still happen. But the question, the reason of that, I don't like it, it, has much less impact if you have a good brand. So brand building is important, uh, but it's a very long game. It takes time, and if a brand is early in their journey, this may or may not be the best place for them to really be able to reduce returns.
Hmm. And talk to us about your data, how you use data in the reduction of returns. Because it seems to me like if you're in the e-commerce space, my sense would be is that literally everything is measurable because it's digital. It's not like you don't know. It's like if you had a store, for instance, you don't know how much dwell time there was on average for the last 500 customers that walked into your retail store. Not yet. Maybe someone should solve that problem. But if you know a lot about the space that you're in, like who your customers are, what is their dwell time, what's your churn rate, what is your CAC, your cost of acquisition, all this stuff. You're sitting on a lot of data. So the question I have for you is, how do you work with data to reduce returns? What does that insight look like for e-commerce companies?
Yeah. So, I think we are the only company which uses a lot of AI and data science to be able to focus on reduced returns. If we were to simply offer returns management, honestly speaking, we don't need much of focus on data. but we have a proper, a data science team which does look at data. Mostly is anonymized form because we are GDPR compliant as well. Um, so we use this data primarily to understand where the things are going wrong, right? It could be related to the product, it could be related to the product description, it could be related to the logistics, it could relate to the packaging, it could relate to the customer or a certain location or certain time. So we track about 150 parameters, from everything from payments to payment method to location, time, everything. We track them and try to make sense out of this, that what could be causing return, let's say in this case. So in fact, we have an engine ourselves. I think world's only platform which has an engine by which can accurately predict whether a specific order will be returned or not. And if it will be returned, then why it would be returned. It could be because of the logistical issues, the customer issues, the product listing issues, the product itself, the packaging, many things. And as you rightly said, right, everything is digital, so it's relatively easy, but it's still not 100% data which you get all the time. And the reason being, for example, if you look at reviews, thrown by the customers, right? People leave their reviews on the website. Amazon is very common, right? Now that is again an AI domain. By review, how can you read a review and understand why the product was, maybe sometimes, many times, there are hidden reasons why person returned the product. They leave a review and they return the product. Okay, this product I don't like, it looks very different, and I'm returning it, right? So no, those places are not straightforward. You have to really use data science to understand the review and try to extract the reason why it is being returned. Also, many times when people return a product, right, they are sometimes in hurry, right? They just simply select a reason why I'm returning it and this is return it. Now, that becomes another very interesting, challenging area, that how do you really get the right insight from the customer, right? So these kind of challenges are there, but we get as much data as possible, and then from that we able to derive what parameter is impacting most and what can be done to really resolve it, right? So these are the kind of things which we really do with data.
Hmm. So, can we talk about AI and what you've done in that space? I know you've touched on it, like having AI read a sentiment, well, a review, and pulling out from that some kind of quantifiable insight that then can be extrapolated to in the actual returns process, reduce the return outcome. But it's interesting, like. How many founders I talk to now who have, it's like everyone has some kind of AI thing. It's quite frightening. Like there's someone doing something with AI. Like it's very rare to find someone who doesn't have that now in their portfolio. So when it comes to the use of AI, I know this is something that's not going to go away. It oftentimes creates a competitive advantage, which is what you guys have in your space. What has been hard for you about AI, and what is your advice to a founder who's looking to get into the use of AI and the applications of AI in their own startup?
Yeah, AI is, so there are two different kind of AIs, people usually use. One is with structured data, another is with unstructured data. So unstructured data is typically images, videos, those kind of things. And structured data is typically like a database where you have data coming in. So, building an AI system on structured data, I would say is uh, more, much more easier to implement compared to, AI engine with unstructured data. For example, in our case, we have a tool by which we are able to do quality grading of the product once it comes back to the warehouse. So that tells you that whether it's a fresh product to be sold again, or a seconds level product, or a discard level which has to be thrown away, because it's no longer saleable. So the kind of effort we had to put in to build a system like that was 100x higher as compared to the other systems we built within our platform. For example, the return risk assessment. So this kind of a just built on structured data. It was relatively easier to build, much faster to build, much faster to test, as compared to taking up a task of quality grading, which is very expensive, very difficult process altogether. So my suggestion, I think it depends on the company stage, how early you are. Like we are a seed funded company, So if you are an early stage or a bootstrap company, unless the founder himself is extremely technical and is very good in AI ML himself, I would say that you should build AI ML only when it's gonna give you significant competitive advantage. Otherwise, it could be a significant effort. It can take away all your resources and energy and might not be able to give you the kind of value you're looking for. But if you are a funded company, of course, right, you will continue to look for different ways of differentiating and moving ahead of everybody else in the market. And I think that's where the AI becomes very critical. You have to have a dedicated team, but it should be really solving a real problem. And then there's a term for called AI for good. Is your AI for good? In our case, for example, we know our AI is for good. Good for everybody. It is not necessarily to replace a human worker. It doesn't do any of that stuff. It is primarily to save you money and also save the environment, right? That's where we come in.
Yeah. Okay, got it. So don't you work with AI unless you have lots of money to spend.
Or you are really, really good yourself, right? You don't have to really
Yeah.
spend money on anybody else. As a founder, you can do whatever you
That's not going to be me, okay?
like.
I'm not that guy. I'm like, yeah, you do it. I'm not that guy. I'm the visionary. This is what we're doing. Go do it.
Yeah.
So a couple of things on AI. You mentioned the word prediction just before. Um, how accurate now is prediction if you're using AI? So in other words, the ability to predict, whether something is going to be returned or not, or maybe even to forecast the, next month or 3 months, what the total returns impact will be on an e-commerce store. How accurate is it now? Actually, structured or unstructured data. Let's assume you got that down pat. How accurate is prediction in the space?
Right. So we don't have a forecasting mechanism for the sales at this moment because that's not our focus. But if you look at a returns possibility of a specific order, we don't offer it to every of our customers. Somebody who has at least a few hundred orders down the line, only then our system kicks in and starts giving the data because AI simply depends on how much data you have access to. If you have more data, it's much better to to do a prediction. So we see currently we are sitting at about 85 to 90% kind of an accuracy range already, right? Even for the smaller store, somebody who does not have historical data, but since our models are trained on all the stores we work with, we are able to get insights from all the stores, and that can apply to a specific store as well. It's pretty high already, and we do see that this will actually eventually get to in the range of 95% plus kind of range. And the biggest impact of this is that once you're able to say why the return will happen, because we do that as well, right? That can really lead to a lot of things. You can do as a business a lot of things you can do to really safeguard and reduce the possibility of returns and improve your profitability. And so we are slowly getting there. I would say it's pretty high accuracy already.
So where do you hope to be? I mean, if you're reducing returns, let's just say 30% now, 28%, round about there on average. Let's say that as your AI gets more sophisticated, what do you feel are new, previously not possible, targets to reach in terms of the reduction of returns? What does that future actually look like for you and your customers?
Yeah. So what we see today is that we have very clear visibility that we will get to something like a 45 to 50% kind of range as far as return reduction is concerned. But our goal is not that. Our goal is to get to about 70, 75%, right? And I won't have all the answers to it today, to be honest. I think it's a journey we will go over next, few years and see how do we, push the envelope, from 45% to all the way to 70%, right? Um, but I'm confident looking at what I'm seeing today and the way we are moving. I'm confident we will eventually get there.
Well, that's reducing the $500 billion returns category by something like 400, and my maths in my head, 407, well, $375 million. That's a lot of money.
Yeah, theoretically, yes, but yes, absolutely. It's
Well,
possible. Yeah.
I hope you get there. I think it's interesting where you are. And I have one more question, a couple more questions, three more questions for you. One is, you're in a very interesting niche. Like you could have gone into any kind of aspect of e-commerce, but you chose to get into reduction of returns, not even returns management. You're like a piece, a niche, a sub niche of the niche returns management of e-commerce, the category. What is
Yeah,
that? In what way has that driven your growth? In other words, what I've learned, scaling companies is like you got to choose, and the more niche you get, the more specialist you get, the more valuable you get. In other words, if there were two providers, let's just say, someone doing returns management holistically, and then someone doing reduction of returns. If I knew that I need to reduce returns, like I'm always going to choose you over someone that's just generic. I do returns management or I do e-commerce support or whatever the case is. So, in what way has niching down actually driven the growth of Sara?
a lot, I would say, right? See, finally, every product company actually has a story to it, right? And the story is something which should make sense to your customers, right? It's a narrative in some sense, right? So many times when we went to our customers, right, they did not even realize that it was even possible to reduce returns. They always thought return management is the way, right? Just manage it. And then we told them, if you have a disease, you don't just manage it, you try to cure it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that has worked very well for us, right? So I think it has helped us position ourselves very uniquely because when we help, say, when we reduce returns, we are not only helping you financially, but we're also helping environmentally, right? A lot of these brands are also very, very brand conscious these days, if you really look at it, right? In fact, our website, for example, is net zero, right? So, and a lot of these brands like these things about us that we are not doing it just for the sake of, running a software solution company and generating some revenue out of it. It is actually going to be good for them and for the environment. And I think that has helped us grow a lot. We have been growing very rapidly in last, several months, I would say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's such an interesting niche that you're in, really is. So, obviously, what you're doing is really, really hard. Like, if it was easy, everyone would be doing it. It's hard. I get it, right? And I know you're nodding your head, and I know you get that. But when you cast your mind back to like the first day, right, of the founding of Saren, you're like, "Yo, I'm going to do returns management. This is our thing, and we're going to fix the environment, etc., etc." When you cast your mind back to that first day, what is, and if I gave you a time machine and I said, listen, go back to, Sachin on day one, right? What advice would you give yourself about building a business or this business in particular?
That's a that's a very interesting one. Um, See, I would, simply think like that, right? Pick up low-hanging fruits first, and make progress with that. And why I'm saying this is because when we started Sara, when we started Eco Returns, we really started with the computer vision models for the quality inspection on the products, right? And that was a hard problem to solve. We literally ended up dealing with millions of pictures in a very, very short time, using some really big GPU-based servers trying to train our models. And I think we should have picked up something simpler, right? There are simpler things to do. We could have done that, and that would have saved us time. Where we are today, we probably would have been at the same place about 6 months earlier than we are today, right? So, would have been even faster growth. I think that's the only thing I can think of. Of course, along the way, we made our own mistakes. We learned from those. And if I can go back, I'll try to avoid those mistakes. But when I try to avoid those mistakes, I'm sure I'll make new mistakes,
Mm-hmm.
which can continue anyway.
Yep.
So no regrets about that. But yeah, try to get some low hanging fruits. I think if I would do it, pick up something simpler, smaller to start with, which can create value quickly rather than trying to be, all over the moon and very quickly, no time altogether. I think that might be only advice I will give to myself.
Mm-hmm. So, Sachin, let's wrap this up. Why do you do all of this? Like, what gets you out of bed in the morning?
See, one of the thing, once you become a serial entrepreneur, right? First time you're an entrepreneur for different reason. You want to build a company, grow rapidly, create some wealth maybe, right? But this is my third company, right? And when you had reached to at that stage, you are actually driven by purpose, right? At least I am driven by purpose in this case, and the purpose is not to just make money. That's a vibe, that's a secondary thing. for us, it's there is a fundamental problem in e-commerce businesses that needs solving, and we want to solve that. In fact, many times I dream about solving problems. How do we do this? Can we do that? Right? So there are a bunch of ideas keep coming, and I think morning when I wake up, especially, I think it's the best time, to think freely and come up with new ideas, new concept, what can work, what cannot work. And once as the day takes over, then you're of course busy. You're busy with the product, busy with the customers. But yes, this is something which our whole team actually is very motivated about, right? They come up with new ideas themselves. Okay, Sachin, why don't we do this, right?
Mm.
Because everybody is clear. We are not a returns management company. We are a return reduction company, and that's what we aspire to do, and that's what we will continue to do.
Hmm. Yeah, very, very interesting story, man. It really, really is cool, and I get what you're saying a lot about, being in a place of purpose. Because I think there's nothing worse than, like, my previous company that I had was a lead generator for tech companies. So we worked with like Microsoft, Oracle, these guys, and we did very well. But man, like zero purpose. You know what I'm saying? Like it had zero ROI in the passion bucket. You know what I mean? Like it was cool in the beginning to scale the thing, and then it's like, hang on, what difference am I actually making here to the world? Am I just putting a zero on like Microsoft's bottom line? You know what I mean? Like they make $1 billion a week. Sorry, yeah, a week profits. So, like what difference am I really making? And I think it's an interesting maybe point to finish on, because my sense is like there's this, I think, 10 years ago when people were starting to get into, like, entrepreneurship wasn't a thing like 25 years ago. Now it's a thing. Like everybody wants to be either like a content creator, entrepreneur, like that's the thing. I think, especially when you're young, it is about the money. But as you get older, and I know you've got kids, I got kids, you start to realize that actually you can make a difference and make money at the same time. And I'm seeing more and more and more of that in startup founders, which is very, very exciting. Because if you're not making a difference, like, you should question why not. Or if you're not making the difference that you can make now, what changes can you make in your business so that you can start to actually contribute, to the greatest degree possible, as a founder entrepreneur? Because everything, by the way, that is today was changed by someone, an entrepreneur usually, from the way that it was. So it's visionaries such as yourself, that are going to change the world. And so if that's what you're about, if that's your DNA, you should be contributing. Like you don't make money first and then make a difference later. You can do both at the same time. And that for me is a huge point to finish on.
Absolutely, Matt. And what you're doing is also very purpose driven, right? You're helping entrepreneurs, right? You're an entrepreneur yourself. So I'd like to thank you for that, what you're doing. That's very purpose driven. And, wish you all the best in what you are doing as well.
Likewise, dude. Listen, thank you for being on the show. I hope to get you back when you've like hit those new ARR numbers. But Sachin, thanks for being on the show. Thanks everybody for tuning in. We'll see you all again soon. Ciao, ciao.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you. Have a good day.